Hey everyone, this is Notes for Unit 3 Factoring. We're in Lesson 3 Factoring Trinomials when the coefficient in front of x squared is larger than 1. We are still in the note pack, and this is the last two examples in the note pack. So number 4 said to factor 6x squared minus 3x minus 18. So the first step in factoring is to see if a GCF can be pulled out. So looking at negative 3 and negative 18, a 3 is the largest number that will pull out of all those. I cannot pull out a variable because there's not a variable in this. So 3 into 6x squared would be 2x squared. 3 into negative 3 would be negative x. And 3 into negative 18 would be negative 6. So now I have to take the parentheses and factor just this piece. This is what I'm concentrating on. So since this is a square, I know that I'm going to have two parentheses. It's going to factor into two binomials. So 2x squared would be 2x and x. And then I have to get a negative 6. So I have a lot of some options here. I have 1 times 6 and I have 2 times 3. Now to get a negative, I'm going to have to put a positive and a negative in the parentheses. So I'll put a positive and a negative. So once again, for right now, we are ignoring this piece and just concentrating on this. So to get a negative 6 there, I have to use these numbers and signs. Now I could change these signs, but once I do one, I'm going to see if I need to change those. So let's just try 1 and 6. So if I try 1 and 6, some of you should be able to do this in your head, but if I do 2x times x, that's going to give me 2x squared in work, and 1 times negative 6 would give me negative 6, so I'm good so far on this and this. So now I have to get negative 1 in the middle. So when you have a number here, this number is going to multiply to that position. So 2 times negative 6 would be negative 12x. So whatever I put here gets doubled. And then 1 times x would be positive 1x. That's going to give me negative 11x, which I need a negative 1x. So this is not going to work. Now what happens if I change this to a minus and this to a plus and keep the numbers the same? That's just going to change the signs on everything. It won't change if that's right or right. It just changes the sign on this 11. So I would have 2x squared to work out in front. Negative 1 times 6 would be negative 6, just to show you. The outer and the inner terms would be 12x minus x, and that would be positive 11x, which is what we said. It's just going to change the sign. So that doesn't work. So what I could try is I could switch these and say a 6 here and a 1 here. So if I switch those, let's see if that works. So 2x times x would give me 2x squared. 6 times negative 1 will give me negative 6. So it works for the first and the last terms. Now check the outer and the inner. So the outer would be negative 2x, and the inner would be 6x. Would give me a total of 4x. So 4x is not what I need. I need a negative x. So that's not going to work. I could flip-flop these, or excuse me, I could change these signs, but the only thing that will do is change that to a negative 4. So 1 and 6 does not work. Let's try something else. So let's try the 2 and the 3. So if I put a 2 here and a 3 here, then 2x times x would be 2x squared. 2 times negative 3 would be negative 6. 2x times negative 3 for my outer would be negative 6. And then 2 times x would give me positive 2x. And that gives me negative 4x, which I just need a negative x. So that doesn't work. If I switch these signs, the only thing that's going to do is change that to a positive. So if this was a positive 3 and this was a negative 2, that would be positive 6 and negative 2 to be positive 4. So that doesn't work. So what I have to do there is change the position, because this 3 is getting multiplied by the quantity of 2. So if I change the position, maybe that will work. So let's try that. So this time I'm going to try a 3 here and a 2 here. So check your first term. That would give you 2x squared. 3 times negative 2 would give you negative 6, so I'm good for the first and last. Now I have the outer would be negative 4x, and the inner would be 3x. Putting those together, I would get a negative x right there. So negative x is exactly what I need. So that works. So the parentheses here reduces or factors to 2x plus 3 times x minus 2. And remember the number that I marked out over here was a 3. I have to remember to bring that 3. I just marked it out to concentrate on this parentheses. But the 3 has to be brought down into the answer. Because if I multiply all of these out, it has to give me this. Okay, so that's the factored answer there. The next problem says 3x squared plus 5x minus 12. So the first thing I'll look for is a GCF. So if you look at these 3 terms, the largest thing that will pull out is a 3. X squared is negative, so I don't have to worry about that. So if I pull a 3 out, I'm left with x. Oh, excuse me, I can't pull a 3 out. I'm sorry. What I was thinking there. So 3, 5, and 12, there's nothing that goes into that. So what that's going to do is, since it's a squared here, it's going to break down into 2 binomials. So how would I get a 3x squared? The only combination I could have there is a 3x and an x. So now I have to get a negative 12 there, and that has a lot of options. 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4. And to get a negative 12, one of these has to be negative. So let's put a plus and a minus here. So now I want you to start thinking, whatever you put here in this position is going to get multiplied by 3, and then I add it. So what do you want to try over here? Try to make an educated guess about 3 times something, which would be a negative answer since the negative's here, plus whatever you put here has to give you 5x. So I'm going to try 3 and 4. So what if I try 4 here and a 3 here? So I would have 3x squared would be my first. 3 times negative 4 would be negative 12. So it works for both the first and the last. Now let's try the outer and the inner. So I would have negative 12x plus 3x. Put those together, that's negative 9x. That's not what I need. So I didn't guess right. So I have to guess something else. So I could change the signs here, but the only thing changing the signs does is change the sign here. So what if I switch those? And I do a plus here and a negative here. So what I did is I switched where these are. That switches this quantity getting multiplied by the quantity of 3. So 3x times x would be 3x squared. 4 times negative 3 would be negative 12. 3x times negative 3 for my outer would be negative x, and 4 times x would be 4x. This would go together to give me negative 5x. So my first and last terms work. My negative 5x is pretty close, but it needs to be a positive. So how do I make something to be a positive? I leave my numbers where they are, and I just change the signs. So here I would make this a negative and this a positive. Because what would that do? Well, 3x times x would still be this. Negative 4 times 3 would still be negative 12. 3x times positive 3 would be positive 9x. And then negative 4 times an x would be negative 4x. So 9x minus 4x would be positive 5x, which is what I need. So number 5 factors to 3x minus 4 times x plus 3. And that would be your answer.